6 in the morning. I'm standing waist deep in my own lake, chainsaw roaring in my hands, ripping through metal posts holding up "No trespassing" signs that magically appeared overnight on land I paid for, bled for, and rebuilt from the ground up. Gas fumes cutting through the cool mist while chunks of metal splash into the water I'd spent 8 months bringing back to life. 8 months of busted knuckles, sore shoulders, and $67,000 of my inheritance poured into 47 acres of what used to be rotten swamp, now turned into something close to paradise. Clear water, base jumping at sunset, families casting lines off my rebuilt dock, kids laughing in the shallows where I hauled out truckloads of stink and sludge. I'm mid-swing with that chainsaw when a white BMW SUV glides down my gravel drive like it's pulling into a country club valet, and out steps Bridget Halstead, president of Silvercrest Heights HOA, bleach blonde helmet hair, designer sunglasses, clipboard tucked in like a weapon, and right beside her, a sheriff's deputy trying very hard to look official and not like he got dragged into something stupid. She doesn't ask permission to come onto my property. She just does it. Heels clicking over my gravel like she owns the whole valley. "Sir," she says, in that fake sweet tone people use when they're already mad at you. "You're standing in community property. This entire lake belongs to Silvercrest Heights. You've been trespassing on HOA land for months." I just stared at her, water dripping off my shirt, chainsaw still humming in my grip, trying to process how I could spend nearly a year out here alone, sweating through mud and diesel fumes, and somehow end up being the trespasser. But Bridget Halstead didn't realize who she was picking a fight with. My name is Dean Moretti, 52, divorced, Italian blue-collar lifer, ex-electrician who spent 20-plus years wiring houses in Bakersfield, living in a shoebox apartment where the HOA had 27 pages of rules about doormat colors and the approved shade of beige for window blinds. My marriage died the same week my grandfather's construction company finally sold. She got the house, the boat, and whatever was left of my peace of mind. I got my tools, my pickup, and $180,000 from my grandfather's estate, the most money I'd ever seen in one place that didn't belong to someone else. One night at 2 a.m., running on cheap whiskey and raw anger, I stumbled on a listing, 47 acres in Red Hill County, with what the ad generously called a recreational lake. The pictures looked like a crime scene. Brown water thick as chocolate pudding, cattails dead and rotting, a dock leaning sideways like it had given up on life somewhere around the Bush Sr. era. The smell when I first drove out there slapped me from 50 yards away. Stagnant water, rotting plants, maybe a skunk family reunion somewhere in the mix. Most people would have turned around. I saw bones. The auction paperwork said the place used to be a base hotspot in the 80s before some old recluse named Earl Cowlson let it rot for decades. I threw in a bid, $127,000, and by that afternoon, the dead lake was officially mine. Those first 4 months almost killed me. I rented dredging equipment that sounded like the devil's lawnmower and spent dawn to dusk pulling muck, branches, tires, and God knows what from the bottom. My hands looked like ground beef from staying wet all day. But slowly, the miracle happened. The water started to clear. Here's the little piece of wisdom that saved me. Moving water stays clean water. I installed solar-powered aerators, piping air through the lake, keeping algae from choking it to death, giving fish something to breathe again. By month 6, I had 8 feet of clear water. And because nature is smarter than any HOA, bass showed up like they'd been listening on some underwater group chat. Fish find good water the way bloodhounds find bacon. Families started stopping by, asking if their kids could swim in the sandy shallows I carved out. The crunch of tires on my gravel road became my favorite sound. Weekends, Miguel Santos, a local fishing guide, brought clients. Dr. Sarah Chun started bringing her high school biology students to run water tests. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was building something that wasn't going to get taken away from me. And that was when the devil in designer sunglasses rolled up. That first day, Bridget marched across my dock like she was inspecting a crime scene. "I'm here to verify your permit status for this water management operation," she announced. "Ma'am," I said, setting my drill down. "This is private property. You need a permit to be here." She laughed, sharp enough to peel paint. "Oh, honey, that's where you're mistaken. This entire watershed falls under Silvercrest Heights HOA environmental oversight. I'm Bridget Halstead, association president. and you've been operating without authorization." She pulled out a folder so thick I thought she might actually be legit. Citations, community lake management protocols, legal letterhead, stamps, the whole show. Then she slapped a notice on my dock. "Cease all activity or face escalating fines starting at $2,500. "And this," she said, "is just the beginning, Mr. Moretti." Watching her BMW disappear up my driveway, I realized I wasn't dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was dealing with a full-blown control freak armed with paperwork. Within 48 hours, government trucks were crawling all over my land. Fish and Game Monday at 7 a.m., Water Quality Board Tuesday, County Planning Wednesday. Each one reading from the same script. Anonymous complaints from a concerned citizen in Silvercrest Heights that I was destroying protected wetlands. The funny thing? Every inspector looked confused. The Fish and Game officer actually said, "Sir, this is the cleanest small lake I've seen in the county. I'm not even sure why I'm here." But allegation equals investigation, and that was exactly what Bridget was weaponizing. Bureaucracy as a blunt instrument. What she didn't expect was that I'd been doing everything by the book. Dredging permits, water use documents, environmental studies that cost me $4,000. I had receipts for my receipts. So I decided if she was going to use the system, so was I. I spent an entire Saturday buried in the Red Hill County Recorder's office, under buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee and old paper. I dug through records back to the 1960s, looking for anything with the lake on it. And I found dynamite. Back in 1963, Earl Cowlson had built the lake as part of a gravel mining operation. It was man-made, registered, and never classified as a protected wetland. Then in 1999, when Silvercrest Heights was built, they were supposed to file a watershed impact study, basically, explain what all those pretty lawns and streets would do to runoff. They never did. For 25 years, stormwater, fertilizer, oil, and road salt from that shiny little subdivision had been draining into my lake, slowly killing it. She said I destroyed the ecosystem. In reality, I was cleaning up their mess. I filed my own complaints: illegal runoff, unpermitted storm drains, environmental violations tied directly to the subdivision. And pretty soon, those same government trucks that had been visiting me were rolling into Silvercrest Heights, inspectors popping manhole covers and sampling water coming out of their drains. While all that was spinning up, a quiet piece of intel showed up that changed everything. An elderly woman named Helen Durham drove out one afternoon with a weather-beaten photo album. She'd lived in the area since before the roads were paved. She flipped to a black and white photo, men in overalls, smiling beside a brand-new, freshly dug lake. In the background was a sign, "Future site of Silvercrest Heights, coming 1999. And there, off to the side, arms folded, little girl with bleached hair and a scowl that could sour milk. Young Bridget Halstead. Helen tapped the photo. "She threw a tantrum back then," she said. "Swore this lake should stay in their family forever. When her dad sold the development rights, she never got over it." Suddenly, the environmental concerns made sense. This wasn't about clean water or community oversight. This was about a 30-year grudge. In her head, I hadn't bought a property at auction. I'd stolen her family's lake. Then came the certified letter from Harlington and Cade LLP, a high-end Sacramento law firm that usually works for developers, not HOAs. Their argument was twisted genius. They claimed the lake was a common amenity for Silvercrest Heights, that I had improved HOA property without authorization, and owed $50,000 in damages. They weren't saying I didn't own it. They were saying my restoration had increased their asset value, and they wanted to bill me for the privilege. I started calling attorneys. Most gave me polite versions of, "We can't touch this. Those guys feed us too much work." That's when Miguel said, "You need to talk to Judge Arthur Breen." Arthur Breen, retired Superior Court judge, lived out in Pine Hollow. When he opened his door, he looked like central casting for wise old judge, white beard, clear sharp eyes, and a presence that made you stand up straighter whether you wanted to or not. He sat at his kitchen table, read Harlington and Cade's letter, then chuckled. "Son, they think you're scared and broke. They're counting on you folding. But this," he tapped the letter, "this is sloppy intimidation. And I don't like bullies with letterhead." Over coffee and stacks of law books that smelled like pipe tobacco and decades of arguments, he pulled apart their claims. They hadn't proved ownership, hadn't established jurisdiction, and were demanding money based on a house of cards. Then we dug into Silvercrest Heights' HOA financial statements. And that's where the real story exploded. They were $340,000 behind on infrastructure bonds, especially for stormwater systems that were supposed to protect the watershed, but never fully installed. On top of that, their original development agreement obligated them to provide a community lake amenity valued at around $600,000. In plain English, they were broke, they owed the community a lake, they never built it, and now that I'd resurrected one, they wanted to slap their name on it and call the debt paid. In meeting minutes from 2019, we found the smoking gun, HOA notes about cost-effective amenity solutions. And next to it, in Bridget's handwriting, Moretti property, acquisition target, whatever it takes. It hit me like a punch. This wasn't just harassment. This was a long-planned scheme to let some sucker buy a dead lake, dump time and money into it, then use legal threats and HOA power to take it. I'd been that sucker. Until now. As soon as Bridget realized I wasn't backing down, and that I had Judge Breen in my corner, she went from smug to desperate. That's when things got ugly. First, my aerators mysteriously failed. Motors that had run flawlessly burned out. Wiring that should have been clean showed signs of being deliberately cut. Tom Martinez, an electrician friend, opened a junction box, looked at the mess, and said, "This isn't aged, Dean. Someone did this on purpose." So I installed hidden cameras around the lake, tucked into cattails, mounted on posts, all feeding to my phone. At 2:17 a.m. one night, motion alerts woke me up. I watched live as a figure in light clothing crept around my aerator station with something like bolt cutters in hand. The audio picked up the distant purr of a BMW engine idling on the access road. The next morning, I found a dropped gardening glove near the damage. Expensive, pristine, still tagged from a high-end department store. Meanwhile, inside Silvercrest Heights, cracks were forming. Our anonymous contact, someone on the HOA board, sent recordings of meetings where members screamed about rising legal bills, postponed pool repairs, and the fact that their fees were paying to fund Bridget's personal vendetta. Local media picked up the story after Helen and Sarah tipped them off. Divorced electrician restores dead lake. HOA tries to claim it. Drone footage showed before and after shots, from brown sludge to clear blue water, kids fishing, families laughing, and in sharp contrast, a still of Bridget in her sunglasses, scowling. It played perfectly on the evening news. Environmental groups weighed in, praising the restoration. Property rights advocates started using my case in blog posts and forums. The county DA began reviewing potential misuse of HOA authority. Harlington and Cade quietly withdrew from representing Silvercrest Heights, leaving Bridget with a nervous junior attorney and a mountain of bills. And so we came to the final showdown. The Silvercrest Heights Community Center was packed. Over 300 residents squeezed into a room built for half that. More people outside with speakers, 2 TV crews, reporters, the whole circus. The air conditioning tapped out 20 minutes before the meeting, leaving it hot with sweat, anger, and cheap carpet cleaner. Bridget strutted in 15 minutes late, wearing a black suit and a face that looked like she hadn't slept in a month. Stress had eaten through her perfect image. She gave a presentation with charts and buzzwords about environmental protection and community standards, but every time she spoke, you could feel the room pulling away. People had seen my lake, they'd seen the restored water, they'd read the documents leaked from inside the HOA. Her story wasn't landing anymore. Then Judge Arthur Breen took the mic. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He laid out the timeline like a documentary narrator. The missing impact study, the HOA's debt, the unmet obligation to build a community lake, the long-term plan to target my property, the internal notes with my name on them, the PR smear campaign, the sabotage, the misuse of HOA funds. He put up enlarged copies of documents on a portable screen. HOA minutes discussing acquiring Moretti's lake. Financial statements showing tens of thousands spent on lawyers and PR firms. That handwritten note. Moretti property, acquisition target. Whatever it takes. The room went silent, then erupted. Bridget snapped, shouting that I was an outsider, that I didn't understand their community values, that people like me didn't belong shaping what Silvercrest Heights became. The subtext in her voice, class, background, even my last name, didn't slip past anyone. That's when Helen Durham, 78 years old and 5 feet nothing, stood up and said, loud enough to cut through the noise, "I watched your uncle dig that lake, Bridget. This isn't about protecting the community. This is about you throwing a tantrum for 60 years because you couldn't own everything you wanted." People stood and clapped. Long hard. Then a sheriff's deputy walked up front and served Bridget with paperwork. Criminal referral for attempted fraud, harassment, and misuse of community funds. Right behind him, a process server handed her a civil lawsuit, my lawsuit, for damages, legal fees, and penalties for frivolous litigation. She stormed out to her BMW, cameras catching every second of it. 30 days later, the legal dust settled. The court confirmed my ownership of the lake, permanently, every boundary dispute resolved, every HOA claim dismissed with prejudice. The HOA paid my legal fees and reimbursed taxes I'd been paying on land they claimed was theirs. Bridget Halstead lost her real estate license, pled to misdemeanor charges, got probation and restitution orders, and eventually had to sell her house in Silvercrest Heights to pay her debts. Last I heard, she's renting a small apartment in a complex with no HOA, no board, no gavel, just thin walls and bad parking. Meanwhile, my lake, now officially Moretti Lake Reserve, is everything I dreamed it could be and more. In summer, up to 800 visitors come out on weekends. Local businesses thrive off the traffic. We opened a small environmental education center with donations. Sarah's students test the water. Miguel guides families on catch-and-release trips. Kids who've never seen clean, open water before stand on my dock and watch bays flash beneath the surface like living silver. Some nights I sit on that same dock, coffee in hand, listening to the aerators hum and the low murmur of people enjoying a place that was once dead and forgotten. And I think about how close I came to giving up, to selling out, to walking away because the pressure, the legal threats, the smear campaigns felt like too much for one guy. But then I remember this. My grandfather didn't break his back, so his grandson could roll over for a clipboard and a title. So I'll leave you with this question. When someone with fake authority, a fancy letterhead, and no conscience decides your hard work belongs to them, what do you think real justice should look like? Just a quiet win in court, or a full-blown reckoning like the one Silvercrest Heights got when they came for the wrong lake and the wrong man?